We would be solving number of provinces for today. This is a Leetcode problem, and as you can see, the problem states that there are n cities, and the cities could be interconnected between them. Like, for example, in this case, city 1 is interconnected with city 2, and city 3 doesn't have any connections in between. So they have a term called provinces. Provinces are cities that are connected in between them, and we have to calculate the total number of provinces in this case. So in this case, there are only two provinces because this would be considered 1 and 2 would be considered one province, and 3 in itself is one province. So basically, what we are calculating is the number of clustered connections, and if there are cities who are clustered, we are going to count them as one province, and the city in itself that doesn't have any connections to anybody, it can be considered in itself a province. So let's take an example of this. Say, for example, city, there are three cities, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's use array indexes like 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's assume 0 is connected with 1 and 3 is connected with 4. So how many provinces we have, right? We have 3 provinces. This is 1, this is 2, and this would be our third province, right? So the way they have represented it would be array index of 0 is connected in itself and is connected with the next index but is not connected with 2, 3, or 4, right? So this is representing this one. So 0 in itself is interconnected with itself. It is connected with 1 but is not connected with 2, 3, 4. Similarly, for 1, it would be, it is connected with 0, it is connected with itself, but it is not connected with any other cities. For 2, it is not connected with 0, it is not connected with 1, it is connected in itself but not with 3 or with 4. Similarly with 3, it is not connected with 0, not connected with 1, 2 is out of question, and it is self-connected, and sorry, and it is connected with 4. And same goes out for 4, it is not connected with 0, it is not connected with 1, not with 2, and not with it is connected only with 3, and it is connected only with 4. So this is the matrix we would be given, considering this is the provinces. And now the question becomes, how do we calculate the number of provinces? This is a case of simple depth first search, right? So what we are going to do is search through our cities where one would be connected to another, would be connected to another, and how long would we be searching? That is the question. So how long would we be searching? And we would be searching till the point there is no more connection. So for example, if we are starting the search with 0, we are going to search for 1, and we are going to terminate the search if 1 is not connected. Similarly, we start the search with 2 and there is no connection, so we stop, and we search this with 3, it goes to 4, and we terminate the connection. So our condition for the depth first search is that it will recursively call itself till there are no more connections found. So what is the way we can assume like there are no more connections? One is that we can say, let's say this is the index I. So for a particular index, if there are no one before that, we can say for that particular value, uh, there are no more connections from that city to any other cities, right? So we can simply say, summing up all the values prior to I, if and after I, if the value is 0, we can terminate the depth first search, because we know like there is no connections after that. And what are we going to count? We are going to count incrementing it by 1 every time we hit a province. And let's say for 0 we put count to 1. Now after 1 0 we are going to city 1. And are we going to make count 2? We are not going to make it 2, right? Because 0 is interconnected with 1. So how do we know like we 0 is interconnected? So here in the concept of depth first search, every time we are going to search up a new city, every time it is going to recursively call itself, we are going to store the index where it has called itself. So 0 called 1, and we are going to store like in a visited uh, array or something that 1 has been visited. And next time when we are going to search for 1 and we check is it present in the visited array, if it is present we are going to increment count by 0. So basically we are either incrementing count by 1 or 0 depending if it is present in the visited array or not. So let's start off with this example. The 0 is not present in the visited array, so we put 0 and we increment count by 1. This state is executed, and after 0 1 is also visited, so we put 1 in the visited array, and depth first search is terminated because there is no more connection. So next time when we are going to search for 1, we will find 1 in the visited array and we are not going to increment the count. So this is our basic logic. Now let's see how we are going to implement that. So we are like going to build a boilerplate template of depth first search with the index, and the way we are going to check is if sum of this array of this index, and we have to check if there is 0 prior to that index or not. So and so how do we check if there are zeros prior to this is obviously like this. So this actually checks if this is 0, then what we are going to return 1. So the reason we are going to return 1 is, okay, let me just create a visited, and we are going to append every time we are going to visit a particular index in that array, we are going to append it to the visited array, right? And we are going to return 1, or if it is present in the visited array. So if I in visited, we are going to return 0, right? So basically, if we see, this is our formula. We are either returning 0 or we are returning 1 depending on if it has been visited or not. And we would be calling the depth first with the we can say like call this call depth first search with the connections. We will figure it out how we are going to find the connections. So before we figure that out, let us first see how we are incrementing the count. So basically what we are doing is index in your arrays of is connected, and we are just going to do that for search of this index, right? So every time we are getting an, okay, there is a syntax error, range of length. Okay, so for, let's assume this case, so I would, index would be 0 first, the index is 0, so and then index will be 1, right? So this the index. So when 0, we are going to call the depth first search and get the value of 1 or 0. So for index 0, it will add these two values to the visited, and it will get us the count of 1, right? Then what will happen for index 1? Index 1 will check if I is in visited. If it is visited, then it will just return 0 to the count, this one, right? So we have already established our boilerplate template. Now we have to figure out how to call itself with the remaining connections. So the way we can call with the remaining connections is by creating a loop, and we can call this as index. Otherwise there could be conflict, and not that there is, but we don't want to confuse our variables. So let's check for val, and let's enumerate over our array of I, and we would be checking if val equals to 1 and index not equals to I. In that case, call itself with the index. So every time we are at a particular index, it will be extracting the ones from that index. So if val is 1, and if that index where the 1 is, because it is interconnected, right? So if where that 1 is, if that index is pointing to that position of the array, we are not going to count that, call the depth first search with that index, right? Because that particular one, for example, this one we are not going to go in a recursive call with this one, because this in itself is referring to itself. So we are only going to look for indexes that are referring to other cells. So we can ensure that by checking if the index is not equals to the self reference, right? And then we are going to call the depth first search. Now after the call we are going to return 1, because every time again we are actually either getting 0 or 1. So this particular condition will be executed if there are no, if that index is not in the visited array, and the particular cell has got no connection. So this particular condition will definitely get executed for this portion, right? For these two. So we will have two different conditions. One is like a city that is only connected to itself, so we are covering that over here. And the cities that are in the arrays, we will be checking it like this. And in any other case, we will just be putting those in the array and just returning 1 in itself. So that is all set, and now we have to have initialize the count and return the count. Hope there are no errors. Let us check. And we have an error. So what is it? Okay. So yeah, it is that language. Seems fine. Let us run this. And there is a solution. So thank you guys. Hope you liked the tutorial.